The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Discretion is advised.
Here we are, everyone, episode 95. Episode 95 of Rareform Radio is here. I am Dan Cleary, your trusted host and leader. I'm a leader, guys. I'm not a follower. I'm no sheep. You know, I'm not getting that vaccine. I'm not going to wear no mask. I'm not a goddamn sheep. I'm kidding. I did all those things. I'm a total sheep. Boy, we got a show today. I'll tell you what. First, I want to welcome our new patrons. Kevin Smith, dude, thank you very much. Joining all the way from Canada. Appreciate the support. Cousin Sam Paul, Heidi's cousin. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Welcome to the real world. You know, you left. What the hell was your thing? The Church of Science. What is it? Goddamn. Oh my God. Jehovah's Witnesses. Congratulations on your new life. And Chad Wise, thank you very much for upgrading from the $10 tier to the $20 tier. That means you get all the video. So you are fucking riding high, dude. Absolutely stoked. Anybody else wants to become patrons? You know what to do at this point. Patreon.com/rareformradio. Join the party. Get extra shit. All, you know, early access, blah, 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 blah. It's fun. I love it over there. This weekend, I'm recording this on Mother's Day. And yesterday, a 10-story, 23-ton piece of Chinese rocket entered Earth's atmosphere and plummeted to the Earth. And there was a few days when they did not know where it was going to hit and what it was going to do. So the world could have ended for a lot of people, but it didn't. It landed in the Indian Ocean. And how crazy is that? For real, though. Like, what kind of damage would have been done if that hit in Chicago? Or if we were lucky enough, Florida? Just fucking nuts. It could all be over in an instant. Rest in peace, Tawny Katane. You know, a lot of people remember her from the White Snake video or whatever the fuck. I remember her as Tom Hanks' love interest in the classic, tragically overlooked by the Oscars film Bachelor Party from 1980, whatever. Really fucking good. If you guys haven't seen it, this is obviously Tom Hanks pre-Philadelphia, pre-Castaway, pre-Da Vinci Code, and being America's awesome grandfather or whatever he is. Really funny movie. Rest in peace, Tawny. And lastly, before I tell you about the show today, interviewed my mom last week for Mother's Day. And your guys' response has been really wonderful. She was super nervous and is since mortified at some of the things that she said and admitted to. But I'm going to show her all the comments and messages that you guys have sent because it's going to make her feel better. And it made me feel really good. And I'm happy that you guys connected in whatever way you did. It was awesome. It was really awesome for me, except for the parts when she was talking about having multiple orgasms with different dudes. That part sucked. But, you know, it made me laugh, maybe more out of discomfort. Hopefully it made you guys laugh. I know it made some members of my family who listen nauseous. It made them want to throw up. Understandable. Dislike. But Mom, I love you. Thank you for that. Hopefully we'll do that again or some shit. Maybe not that again. A lot of that I don't want to hear again. But it also bred more questions. Today on the show, boy, I just got done interviewing somebody who is just fascinating and guilty of, a horrible crime and possibly many others. Today I interview convicted killer and self-proclaimed cannibal, and now dark artist Nico Claux, who some people know as the Vampire of Paris. And we talked for about 2 hours. So, make some food, cuddle up on the couch, prepare your favorite body part of a human being, and enjoy the interview. There's so many more questions I could have asked, and hopefully I will some other time. But I do appreciate Nico being so incredibly honest and open about his experiences and where he's at nowadays and his mindset and the psychology of the whole thing. I was nervous to interview him, not necessarily to speak to him, but because of my close relationship to Dave Navarro, who everyone here knows, who is the one of the victims and what fallout is when someone is murdered. So I'm very sensitive to the idea of glorifying the things that Nico did, but I truly am fascinated by the childhood aspect and just the mindset of the whole thing. Because weirdly, and the part that freaks me out is that we have similar interests, him and I. And parts of our childhoods are similar as far as being, alone a lot and disappearing into like a fantasy world in your head, in your bedroom. And I did that stuff. The only difference was mine didn't fester into this lack of empathy, which he describes in detail. But it was a really interesting time. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm sure you will. Parts of it are surely uncomfortable. But if you listen to this show, you know what you're getting into. And you know a lot of the questions that I'm going to ask already. So hopefully I touch on the things that you want me to. And if not, we'll do it again. But without further ado, here is my interview with Nico Claux. We are joined today with my guest all the way from Paris, France. We've been trying to get this on the books for a few weeks, but welcome, Nico Claux. Thank you very much for joining the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. I found you through a mutual friend, and I've heard your name before, of course, because I have interest in things that you've been a part of in some ways. And I found your story interesting on many accounts, but I want to give people a little bit of a background. You kind of grew up all over the place in Europe, right?
Yes, when I was a kid, I moved in several European countries. Actually, I was born in Africa, in Cameroon, because my father used to work for a bank. So he was working IT in a bank. So it was a time in the 70s where they had to install new networks, and it was not even the internet yet. So they had to install a lot of different networks around the world, and my father had to move to different countries and to different branches of the bank around the world. But he was mostly moving to African and Asian countries.
Okay.
So I was born in Cameroon, in Africa, and then a little later, my parents moved back to Paris, and then we moved to the UK, then back to Paris, and then to Portugal, several countries. Yes.
Okay, and were you an only child?
Yes, I was an only child, yes.
And what was it like for you? Did you have a tough time moving around that much, or did you like making new friends and like seeing new places?
Maybe the fact of moving all the time made it much harder to have interactions with other kids
Okay.
and to establish trust and friendships. So yes, it was definitely harder as a kid to have basic interactions with other kids my age. So I was very introvert
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, and I built my own little fantasy world in which I lived. I was pretty happy with being that way. I didn't ask myself any questions,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a tendency to be very aware of other people and being judged by them for being a loner.
Mm.
So yeah, I basically I would stay to myself and not, build regular friendships like other kids do.
You mentioned building a fantasy world in your head. Was that like when you would escape to the fantasy world? Would it be in music? Would you watch movies? Would you do art? Like what was your fantasy world that you made for yourself?
From a very, very early age, I was drawn to horror and true crime.
Mm-hmm.
I was very intrigued by true crime books and um, figures like Jack the Ripper and later on Ted Bundy and all those big true crime figures
Mm-hmm.
that I grew up with in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it was definitely something that I was very, very intrigued by. I was also very into horror movies. Later on, I started to listen to metal, heavy metal, death metal.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it was part of my of the culture where I was um, that I was developing. It was of course a time when you did not have access to the internet. So if you were into something very very unpopular and niche, you
Mm-hmm.
had to read.
Yeah,
You had
right.
to read the fanzines and magazines, and later on I would trade videotapes when I was into horror movies, and I would trade audio tapes when I was into metal.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a culture that I developed myself. And back in the days in France, in the late 80s, you didn't have access to any of this. So yeah, I would spend my time getting pen pals, getting pen pals from overseas and around Europe.
Oh
People
wow.
who could send me tapes. Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
So it was mostly horror movie tapes
Mm-hmm.
and stuff that wasn't able in French video stores.
Interesting.
So yes, yeah.
I
Mhm.
can relate.
I was
I
watching a lot of
go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Um, I was starting to really getting into stuff like Faces of Death and all this Mondo subculture,
Mm-hmm. Cannibal Holocaust and
documentaries,
yeah. Yep.
exactly, shockumentaries and stuff like that. So it was definitely not mainstream stuff, and hence the need to seek out other sources of entertainment. Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned being kind of an introvert and the music and the horror movies, and you mentioned Faces of Death, and now it feels like I'm
Yeah.
talking to myself in some ways because I grew up, I made friends pretty easily, but my household was not, the happiest household. So I spent the majority of my childhood and high school years in my room watching horror movies and listening to music. And I remember my mom and stepdad, they rented Faces of Death one night, and they watched it. They had like a viewing party in the living room, and us kids were not supposed to see it, but I kind of snuck in
Yeah.
and watched some of it. And that was the first time I had seen, I know a lot of it's fake, but the first time I'd seen
Yeah.
actual gore and really seen kind of the dark side of humanity. And I was fascinated. I was completely riveted. Yeah, I
I
don't
think
know.
we are. I think we are an entire generation who have grown on watching those things,
Mhm.
and it really sets us apart from the current generation for which everything is so easy. You're just clicking on a few links and you have access to all those stuff that was, really hard for us to have access to. So, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know, but yeah.
I it's a question that I have this conversation all the time. Is it good to see those kind of things? And I feel like
Yeah,
it's different person to person. You know, in some cases it might do some damage. In some cases it might just be, a morbid curiosity. You know.
exactly. It's morbid curiosity. And I don't think knowing so many people who grew up watching those things and who are totally functional individuals now, that it wasn't a bad thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a way of pushing the limits, pushing your own limits.
Sure.
What it's how you build your own morals as a
Mm-hmm.
kid.
Mm-hmm.
Is this wrong? What am I watching something that is morally wrong? How do I feel about this? All those questions that you would ask yourself when you were a kid that define you as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because nowadays, with this freedom of watching everything you want, it's a totally different. I don't know. It's a totally different
Mm-hmm.
situation, and yeah. I'm really curious about what would be the impact on today's uh, internet culture on kids nowadays and how they will grow up as adults. Uh,
True.
yeah,
Yeah. And some people, unfortunately, they could make the argument with someone like yourself that that kind of exposure at a young age could lead to something very negative. You know what I mean? Because
see, that was the main debate
mm-hmm,
during my trial.
mm-hmm,
That was the main debate during my trial. There were it was a year when there were 4 or 5 movies shown at the Cannes Film Festival. There's this huge film festival in France, the Cannes Film Festival, and there were a movie with Johnny Depp called The Brave, where he's playing a guy who stars in a snuff movie.
mm-hmm.
There was another movie called Funny Games.
Yep.
There were really violent movies, and so my lawyer said, "Okay, see the movies that we have nowadays at the Cannes Festival. They glorify violence. And they can seriously mess up with a very influential kid who is already prone to violence or prone to dark fantasies." So yeah, that was the main thing. One of the main things on my trial. I think it's more complex than that. I think that
Of course.
the cocktail, because it's all about the cocktail, it's
Mm-hmm.
way more complex than that. And I think that, you know, in my case, it was indulgence, indulging in horror and extreme violence and all those videotapes that I would watch, extreme S&M, all those things. I had access to all those things. But on the contrary, I think that abstinence from all those things when you are prone to having those dark fantasies, they lead to frustration. And
Sure.
frustration can lead to crime too. Look
Sure.
at Ted Bundy. He was constantly fantasizing over bondage material, etc. And he only had access to mainstream pornography.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to develop his own fantasies and read true crime material and true crime newspapers and articles on serial killers before him, before building his own, fantasies in his head. So it's either indulging in those kind of things or frustration. So
Sure,
what is the
sure.
best? I don't know. Yeah.
So
it's
you're
complex, very complex.
kind of making the argument where had someone like Ted Bundy had an outlet to get these materials easier, it possibly would not have led to him being a serial killer. Possibly.
Nobody can answer that question.
Of course.
I think that nobody can answer that question. It's just a small part of who he was. And I think that the material, whether he had access to it or not, it would have not defined him as an individual.
Mhm.
And that's what's interesting. The cocktail that leads to that is way more interesting than the actual little elements of the cocktail. But you have to understand those elements and those little pieces of the puzzle to get a bigger picture.
And that's kind of what I want to know with you, because I've read that as your childhood ramped up to adulthood, you kind of became, and tell me if I'm wrong, you became sort of angrier and more detached from society in some ways. And what kind of changed your view of people, and what got you going to the point of eventually taking another man's life? I'm curious if looking back, if you can see where that violent streak started. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as I told you before, as a kid, before I was 10 years old, I was very, very, I was a lonely child. I was very introvert.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always view others as potential threats. And when I went to junior high, it became more and more difficult for me to adapt to those kind of environments where I was, I had to go to school and I had to see other kids, and I just couldn't understand how they would function as human beings because I didn't function the same way.
Right.
I didn't have the same springs in me, the same the same wheels spinning inside of me, and I just couldn't understand any of it. And the social interactions, the way you had to behave, the way you have, all those things that were, I felt like an alien going to Earth for the first time. See what I mean?
Of course.
And of course, I'm not the only kid who ever felt that way when going to junior high or high school. But for me, it was very, very difficult in knowing that each time it was a different country. So I had to adapt to other kids, different cultures, and so yeah, it definitely was harder for me. And also, I think that I began to start having very dark fantasies and going on very dark places already at age 10 or age 9. I wasn't, I didn't have a difficult childhood. My parents were very good to me, and they just saw me as a very, very lonely child, very, a very special kid who was staying alone all the time. But I guess that they had other problems too. So for them, it was not a major concern. But I very quickly developed murder fantasies concerning the other kids at school.
Oh wow!
Very vivid and graphic murder fantasies from age 12 to 12, 13. I would fantasize over stabbing them, and at first the fantasies, they were very, very primitive because I didn't have any grasp of anatomy, so For me, killing somebody was very easy. You just had to stab him in the neck, or it was
Right.
easy.
Right.
But as the more I read about serial killers, and the more I understood that killing wasn't that easy. So I began to read anatomy books, and I really began to be interested in human anatomy. Not, and that's interesting, not having in mind of becoming a doctor or nurse or whatever, but more about learning how this machine worked and how to sabotage it easily.
Wow.
If you understand what I mean.
Of course,
Yeah.
I do. I do. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the fantasies of hurting students at school. When you thought about that, did you think about just hurting as many as possible, or particular kids, like particular kids that were either bullies to you or girls that wouldn't talk to you, or was it just kind of a free for all?
First, it was targeted against all the kids who were talking behind my back and telling things, and of course, it was a reaction to bullying and being socially inadequate. But then it got into bigger and bigger proportions, because for me, they were all guilty of being human.
Oh wow.
Because the more I grew up, and the more I didn't feel human at all. I feel
That was my
totally,
next question. Is it sounds like that you didn't
yeah.
see yourself as a human being?
Oh no, no, totally not. I couldn't understand what humanity was about, what compassion was about, what even the most simple human emotions. I just didn't get them. I just didn't understand what they were about. And so yeah, it became more and more fantasies over shooting, stabbing,
Mm.
just randomly. But yes, at first it became, it was very targeted, and then, the more I um, got the more I grew older, and the more it became less, the anger became something more uncontrollable.
Mm.
Yeah, it began to have bigger and bigger proportions. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You're talking about anger, and you said that you had a tough time feeling emotions. You said that your parents were very loving. Did you feel the love, or did you just believe them that they loved you? And also, did you feel what you consider love towards your parents or other family?
Not at all. Not at all, because they didn't express anything, and I
Gotcha.
didn't express anything. So that it was, for the most part, it was a like indifference.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
No real emotions on both sides, and they
Interesting.
probably weren't raised to show emotions, and this is how it, impacted me as a kid. So yes, there was nothing. Yeah.
Wow. Is that something that later in life have those emotions? Are you able to show those kind of emotions nowadays, or is it still something that's hard for you?
Oh no, no, I grew as a human, and I grew as emotionally speaking. I I'm a self-taught man, emotionally speaking. I,
Okay.
I, I, I started from nothing, and I'm going somewhere, and I've been through a lot. So
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
getting much
Good.
better at this. But yes, it was, let's say, I strongly believe that what we call conscious is something that you can be born without, like you are born without limbs, or without a specific organ. And I think that conscience and the ability to feel for others is
Empathy.
something that you,
Yeah.
yeah, empathy. I think that it's something that you can be born without, and then you have to work and you have to go through several experiences to actually learn empathy when you are devoid of it.
Okay. I want to go through some of those experiences. And I want to ask you, you got a job in a morgue, and I want to know how that came about and how old were you when you got the job in the morgue?
From very, very early on, when I was about 10, 12, I've always wanted to work as a deaf in the deaf industry, in the funeral industry, because when I was 10, my grandfather had died, and I went to the wake, and I was fascinated by the atmosphere in the funeral home, and I just swore to myself to work there because, first of all, I knew that I would have no interactions with a living individual, but later on, when I worked there, I actually learned that it wasn't really that way, that you actually had to deal with humans, well, living people in the funeral industry, and that it wasn't that easy. But yeah, when I was a kid, I thought that it would be easier for me, instead of working in an office or working with other people, just to work with dead people. In my mind, it was what I was meant to do. It was like a call, because I've always viewed death and physical death as an entity, and that might sound very primitive, but the only religion in the world that appeals to me is the Santa Muerte religion in Mexico.
Okay.
Because for me, if there is a God, it's death. You know, it's the only for me. It's the only actual entity that's real, because I've experienced it in many ways, in many different forms. And later on in life, I've worked for about 15 years in morgues after my release from prison. So I made an estimation one day. I've worked with more than 15,000 dead people in my life. So I have a foot on the other side.
Right.
And
Sure.
I know some things about that.
I bet.
That's
I
what
bet.
I'm gonna
Well,
say. Yeah.
so
And
I'm
but
fascinated.
when I was 20, I sent resumes to different hospitals. There wasn't a specific school for that. You had to first work as a stretcher bearer, or or an orderly in a hospital, and then they would hire you in the morgue if they needed staff. But I specifically applied for a morgue job, and then I got a few replies, and I worked in a couple of morgues in Paris for about a year. And the last job I got, after 10 months, I got fired. Well, I didn't, no, I wasn't fired, actually. Just me who didn't want to work there anymore. I wanted to work in another hospital. So I quit the job. And 2 months after that, I was arrested for murder.
2 months after. Okay. Do
Yeah.
you? So you worked in the morgue for 10 months, is what you said, right?
All in all, for 12 months.
Okay.
During
Okay.
that year, for 12 months. But in that specific morgue, 10 months. Yeah.
So when you were working there, when you were handling bodies, or the first time you saw a body come in, was it all work for you, or did you have some kind of exhilaration to be around death? Was there did you get a rush? Was there any kind of like sexual element to it, or was it just work at the beginning?
It had always been a fascination for me. I've always been fascinated by death and dead bodies and physical death. And I used to hang out in graveyards before that. I spent at least 4 or 5 years hanging out in graveyards before actually working in a morgue. And by hanging out in a graveyard, I mean spending at least 2 or 3 afternoons a week in a graveyard.
By
So it was
yourself?
not just a go. yeah, by myself.
Mhm.
I would skip school and go to the graveyard. That's what I would do.
Mhm.
Because I was drawn to that, and this is the only place where I felt at home.
Interesting.
And in Paris, there's some very beautiful Gothic graveyards,
Mhm.
and I would spend hours and hours and hours looking at graves and looking at crypts and entering and breaking and entering into crypts and
Mhm.
going inside mausoleums and taking stuff because that's what I ended up doing. And I would bring it home, bones and remains.
Mhm.
And then, my room, because when I used to go to graveyards, I still was living at my parents. But I had I had put a padlock on the in the cellar, in the basement.
Mhm.
So the basement was I only me had access to the basement. So this is basically where I stashed all the stuff that I found in graveyards. So I had this altar that I would pray to, satanic altar, and bones and skulls and human ashes that because I was stealing urns too.
Mm.
And then, yeah, the fact of working in a morgue, of course, it was more than a job. For me, it was the best thing I could do. I was very um, in a state of constant uh, agitation at all times when I was working there.
Mm.
And the only thing that I didn't like was working with the coworkers. And since it was a whole habit, I started to devise plans to get rid of them.
Oh boy.
So yeah.
Right. Well.
So yeah, I had plans in my hand, and I nearly did it actually. There was one guy who I went to his place one day. He had invited me for a drink after work, and I had a pocket knife with me, and I was fiddling the knife in my pocket, and I was undecided as to whether to stab him or not, or you know, it was a time where it was very hard for me to think about consequences of the things that I would do because I felt like nothing could stop me basically. So and I really and that's a common trait to all the people who do those kind of things. It's a total lack of fear.
Mm.
You just don't know what fear is. You just don't know.
So
You just don't know what.
this coworker that you planned on possibly killing, what was so bad about him, or what was it that you thought made him possibly be deserving of that? Did he annoy you, or you just didn't like that he worked with you? What was the issue?
The issue was that morgue, it was three other guys, and they all knew each other outside of the hospital, so they would hang out with each other all the time. They were like a small family unit.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was dating the daughter of the older guy.
Okay.
So it was they were always doing private jokes and joking about stuff that they had done during the weekend, etc. And I was an outsider.
Right.
Plus, I just didn't like the fact that they weren't like me, and I wasn't like them. They were, your typical I don't know, I don't even know how to describe them, but regular Joes, soccer fans.
Yep.
They would talk about shit that they had seen on TV the day before, and I just couldn't relate to them, and they just annoy me on a constant basis. And you have to understand something. For me, it was an honor to work there, and
Right.
I thought that they did not deserve to work there.
So
So for me,
they didn't see the
yeah.
job the way you did. They didn't hold it
No,
as high as you did, and
exactly,
you took it
exactly. For
personal.
them, it was just yeah, exactly. I
Yep.
took it personally because for me, I had developed this special relationship with death, the entity, and for them, it was just a job. So for me, they did not deserve to work there. And so in my very, very warped way of thinking, I saw them as rivals and as people that I had to get rid of.
Mm.
So that was one of the, yeah, it was one of the many things that was going through my mind all the time, because when you're in that mindset, your wheels are spinning all the time. Different things that you want to do, different you want to kill everybody. So any excuse and anything is an excuse. Anything is an excuse.
And so is that the kind of thing where when you woke up every day, is this something that you thought about every day? Did you think about hurting people every day?
That's what I describe in my book. I've written an autobiography called The Gospel of Blood. And it is actually a condition called intrusive thoughts.
Intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, intrusive thoughts. It's something that gets in your mind, it creeps inside your mind, and it's constant. It's constant obsessions, and it never leaves you. Never ever leaves you. So the only outlet is to watch horror movies, but it's just an outlet. And at the end of the day, when you wake up, you always have those same thoughts all over and over again. It doesn't stop. So I don't know. It's the only way that I can describe them is that they are like, you never get rid of them. Never. That what makes these conditions so dangerous, because you are totally set on doing the thing. And nothing will stop you from actually acting out like your death desires.
Yeah. So what did stop you from attacking your coworker on that day?
On that specific day, and this is interesting because it shows you how twisted my mind worked. I was playing with the knife in my pocket, looking at him, trying to figure out how I could stab him from behind in the neck. I was thinking of the fingerprints that I might left in the apartment, all those things,
Sure.
And I was that close to doing it. Actually, he never knew how close he was to not being here anymore.
Right.
And we were talking about the job. And suddenly in my mind, I was like, okay, we are doing the same job. He's a deaf worker too. And even if he doesn't deserve that job, he's not like the other humans. And then I call it the Roman Emperor syndrome. The Roman Emperor syndrome. The Roman Emperor, he looks at the gladiator games. One of the gladiator falls on the ground, and he either goes thumbs up, thumbs down. And I was like, okay, am I going down, up? Okay, thumbs up, just because it was working in the morgue with me.
So it was hard for you to find anyone with anything in common with. So at that last moment, you realized.
Yeah, that was the thing. Yeah, exactly.
He was a peer of yours.
But
you guys, yeah.
That's the ambiguity of this, is that at the same time, the reason why I wanted to kill him is that I thought that he didn't deserve to work with me. So you see, all those things that were playing with
internal struggle,
it was
all the time.
Struggle.
Yep.
Exactly. Very complex emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the destiny and fate, they just, they rely on this, So,
of course. I mean, I've said this many times before where, we've all had those days when you can't find your car keys and you're late. And then you wonder, if you had found your car keys, maybe you would have been in a fatal car accident. You never know when your time is up. You never know what the plan is for you. And that guy,
Exactly.
like you said, he had no idea how close he was to not being here anymore. And a lot of us can
Absolutely.
say that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, when the press talked about my case, etc., and there was investigations in the hospital, of course they understood what that what kind of individual I was. So maybe he understood when I was when he was thinking back at that very specific day. Maybe he understood that he could have been killed.
Absolutely. You also
Yeah.
mentioned grave robbing and going into mausoleums and taking human remains home.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about the first time you did that and what the feeling was and why you did it and what the plan was with the remains?
The very first time I was 17, and it was I had been trying to pick up locks for several months in graveyards, and so each time I had to find a right time in the day where nobody would see me doing it, and I had to understand how the locks worked. And since they were rusty, I had to try different techniques for so that my instruments wouldn't break, etc. So it was a long process. And after a while, I managed to pick up the lock of a very old mausoleum. And when it happened, it was like, when an archaeologist finds a new pyramid or something, I felt like nobody had been there for decades. There was like spider webs everywhere, and you could really feel that nobody had been there for a very long time. And it was a crypt. It was very richly decorated because the mausoleum belonged to a family of what we call White Russians. There were Russians who fled the revolution in 1917, the communist revolution. So they flew to Western Europe and Paris. They had lots of money.
Very
And,
wealthy, yeah.
very wealthy. So their mausoleums were very, very wealthy. And that mausoleum was decorated with golden leaves on the wall and stuff like that. So it was really beautiful. I found an atmosphere there that where I felt in peace with myself. And I felt at the right place for me at the right time.
Was that the
So I
first
stayed there
time?
like,
I'm sorry. Was that the first time in your life that you really felt somewhere that you
yeah,
belonged?
totally. This is the only place where I felt at home.
Okay.
Definitely. So yeah, the first time I stayed there for about 2 hours, 3 hours. Then I would often come back to the place with a book or something and spend hours reading or being by myself in the crypt. And then, of course, I would see all those concrete slabs on the wall, and I knew that behind those slabs there were coffins. But I knew that, in order to have access to those coffins, I had to get more material, crowbars, and it would make a lot of noise, basically. But so in the first months, I didn't do anything, but then I started to try and open them. And after a few months, I succeeded in opening one of those vaults. And I dragged the coffin out and I opened it, and this is where I saw my actual first body. I was about 19. Yeah.
And what was that first feeling of you'd been spending time there, and now you're finally face to face with what you've been thinking about forever? What was the feeling you had?
I really felt like I was breaking the last chain that was linking me to the rest of humanity. And I was, it was very, very spiritual for me, for a very spiritual experience. And I don't know if you've heard about Agoris. Agoris are a tribe of people in India. They are what they call sadhus, worshippers of the god Shiva,
Okay.
and they have during their training as sadhus, they have to spend 7 years on a funeral pyre, next to a funeral pyre.
Okay.
They have to be constantly surrounded by death and funerals and cremations. They feed on ashes, human ashes. They eat human flesh.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of their spiritual training. And of course, Westerners, when they hear that, it's totally alien for them. It's for a standard Westerner being in constant contact with human remains and death, etc., cannot be a spiritual experience. But
it's not part of our
for
culture.
them,
yeah,
exactly, it's not part of our culture. But for them, it makes totally sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in my own way, I follow the same path. I follow the same path. For me, it was a totally spiritual experience. I felt like some kind of revelation doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
And probably a doctor would tell you it's psychosis or whatever. But for me, it was just it was who I was. So it was part of who I was, and I had totally accepted who I was. I didn't think that anything that I was doing was wrong or abnormal. For me, it was just me. It was just the other people who were abnormal and totally wrong, and I couldn't understand them, and I didn't understand how they worked as human beings.
Sure,
So,
but also your world was very, very small too, so you didn't have a whole lot of people to compare with. Yeah,
exactly. Being a lonely child and having no brothers or sisters, no nephews, no outside family, and no friends. I was on my own all the time. So for me, it was totally normal.
So you're face to face with the body with the White Russian in the mausoleum.
Yeah.
And what happens then? Do you touch the body? Do you take anything from that body the first time?
So it was in another tomb years later.
Mm-hmm.
And my idea was to actually cut the head off.
Okay.
So I didn't have the proper tools. So, but I did other things with the remains. I stabbed them. Basically I stabbed them with a screwdriver.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back a few weeks later to get the head. I had brought a hacksaw. And I wanted to start cutting through the head, but since I had opened the coffin, it was starting to be warmer. There was lots of bugs all over the place, and I just, I couldn't do it, so I left. But otherwise, yes, when it was only skeletal remains, I would bring bones back, and I had so many bones at home. Yeah. So, and I would also get urns because the urns were easier to have access to. So I had lots of urns at my place.
Okay, so you said that you stabbed the body. What was? Do you remember what your thought process was? Was it just a way to get anger out, or so it wasn't like you didn't respect the body. What was the thought in attacking it?
It was all the things I've done in my life that are considered as violent, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were for me experience. So you have to understand each time it was to test a weapon, test something. And in that case, I wanted to see how easy it was to stab.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even out of anger.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure to see the resistance of the human body under a knife. It was a curiosity of mine. Yep. And I didn't use the knife that time. I used a screwdriver, but in my mind, it was testing how easy it was to actually stick something in the body. So it might sound really weird, but that was what was going on in my mind, testing things and testing different methods of hurting and doing things that I wanted to do on a larger scale later. And it was the same thing with, it was the same thing with the NATO.
When I was a little boy, there was I was outside, and I grew up in the Northeast in America, and there was a big frog in my driveway, and I don't know why I did it, but I put my foot on the frog and just slowly stepped on it, and just to see what happened. And then, you know, all of the frog's guts came out of its mouth, and I felt bad. I immediately felt bad, but I kind of understand what you're saying, but for me, the intention was not to inflict pain. I was just curious what would happen. I immediately regretted it, but I understand what you mean as far as like the curiosity of what will happen if I do this.
Exactly. It was a mix of things, I guess. Of course, there was sadism, but you know, it wasn't even the central main thing for me. It was just, you know, experimenting things. And later on, when I participated to autopsies in my job, it was the same thing. I was experimenting things. I was intrigued by how easy it was to cut to the incisions with the scalpel, and how you would plunge the blade into it and it would slice like butter. And you know, all those things, and how fragile the human body is. And it always has been a fascination of mine. And I've always been intrigued by the human body and how it functions as a machine. And I have a hard time seeing the human body as something else than a machine. And I have a hard time seeing the soul driving the machine. For me, it's just a vessel, and you know, working with the dead all the time, you tend to see other humans as vessels of eventually a soul inside, or an individual inside. But what you see first is muscles, tissue, sinews, intestines. This is what you see when you meet other people.
Right.
It might sound weird, but this is how your mind works when you are so when you are working with the dead all the time. Yeah.
Well, it's not much different the way soldiers have to kind of see things the same way. You know, if you're at war, you can't necessarily look at your enemy as a father or a mother or a soul or someone's child. You have to look at them as just a piece of meat that is trying to hurt you in a way. So that sounds like a similar.
Yeah, they're trained that way. Except that for them, it's not an individual experience.
Right.
This is something that they are taught to do. It's like cops. They are taught to treat people a certain way. I'm not going to go cop bashing here, but I've known cops a lot, and this is how they do. They are trained that way. They are trained to see individuals as suspects first, and then they ask questions later. So yeah, it's the same process. It's easy to train the human mind. Whether it's soldiers, cops, judges, even, it's easy. It's really easy.
So you mentioned you went back to the morgue, and that's where you claimed that you tried to eat human flesh for the first time. Is that right?
Yeah. It happened after the autopsies, when I was my task as a morgue worker was to stitch them back, and to do the stitches. Yeah, the incision.
Yep.
So of course I was left alone when doing this, because the surgeon was away with all the stuff that he had put in boxes, etc. And after a while, when I was left alone, out of curiosity and because of a long life lifelong obsession with this. I actually tasted it.
So,
and later on, yeah.
what was the first person that you consumed? Was it a man, a woman? Do you remember the age or even the person's name of the first time?
Totally no, I have absolutely no recollection of the name or the face. Just remember it was a male, but he was in his 60s or 70s, the usual age group that we deal with when we work in morgues. When somebody dies in a hospital, usually you only ask for an autopsy when there's a suspicion of something, when it's not really clear. And back in those days, in the late 80s, there was still a lot of pathologies that required autopsies. Nowadays, in 2021, they don't often do autopsies a lot because it costs a lot. But back in the days, yes, there was a few pathologies that required the hospital to conduct an autopsy. So they basically were in the same age group, and between 50 and 70. That age group. So yeah, it was a male, but I don't remember the rest. Yeah.
What part of the body did you eat, and how much did you have that first time?
That very first time, it was from the abdominal cavity. That was what was the easiest to access for me, because this is what was wide open in front of me, and that I had to stitch back up. So it was just bits and strips that I sliced, very small bits that I tasted raw. And then later on, because first time I did it, of course, I was like, okay, I hope nobody sees me doing this. I really hope so.
Yeah, I would think you would not want someone to see that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then I found out that, I was really left alone in the autopsy room. The others were busy doing something else. So it was easy for me to actually get those pieces, put them in a container, put them in my backpack, because I had my backpack. I would bring my backpack every day at work and bring them home. So this is when I tried to cook and fry, etc., etc.
And what was your preference?
Fry, yeah, definitely fry.
Okay.
I'm not a great cook, so I wouldn't, people tend to think of cannibals as great cooks, but it's not really sophisticated, I
Right.
would try, different sauces and different things, but at the end of the day, it was the same meat cut the same way and fried the same way. So it was just, also you tend to imagine that I would eat like huge steaks and huge, no, there were like strips like that big, usually, small strips, because I couldn't afford to get like white steaks from the legs or the thigh. Of course, it have been noticed. So, but the thing was that it was done on a regular basis.
That was my
For
question:
about,
is how often did you find yourself doing that?
I'd say on during the 10 months where I was doing that, about like 3-4 times a month. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. And
plus I was doing something else, because I was also part-time working in the surgery unit, and we're in conjunction with the blood bank. So I would get the blood bags from the blood bank, bring them to the surgery unit, and I had found a system to steal the blood bags, some of the unused blood bags. So I would also bring them home and do stuff with them. Yeah.
well, by stuff, what would you do?
So drinking, of course, then mixing it with the meat, and I even painting the skull with one of the blood bags. Yeah.
So I know you didn't have people in your life, but did you ever serve human to anybody else unknowingly, or did you ever do anything like that? Did you ever any guests or
No,
anything?
no, no.
No.
I've read a lot about Russians who would do that. There's a lot of Russian killers who have done that. I don't know why Russia, or if there is anything special about Russia. But no. For me, I wouldn't. It would be a waste.
Russians,
You know what I mean?
you know, if you might be like me, where I still to this day watch a lot of horrible videos of gore and attacks and murders, and I still have that curiosity to this day. But Russians almost seem to be the most violent, or the most cold of anywhere in the world of those kind of people, and I don't know why that is either. Do you have any idea?
I think it's cultural.
Yeah.
I think it's cultural, and the thing is, we don't know many things about their true crime history. We only know the biggest cases like Chikatilo and several others.
Mm-hmm.
But during the communist days, they would hide those cases. They wouldn't talk about that because it would make a bad press, bad publicity for the Russian Empire, the communist empire. But even recently, without even any communist rulers anymore, they tend not to talk about those cases anymore. And when we hear about cases, just because it's really it's really extraordinary even for them. So imagine their everyday cases. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know, maybe culturally speaking, they've been through several how's it called, famines.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they've resorted to cannibalism in the past, even in the 1950s and after that. So this is something that they have in them. Maybe it's in their blood. You never know.
Right. It could be. Yep. It's like a secret part of the Russian culture, perhaps.
The Russian soul.
Yeah, there you go. I know we don't have all day, but I wanted to jump ahead a little bit to the point that you decided to take somebody's life, and it's a sad story, obviously for the man who lost his life. But I want to know possibly like when the decision was made to do that, and then talk us through, that the day that it happened and what went down.
As I told you a bit earlier, I had those obsessive thoughts, right? And when I was working in the morgue, those obsessive thoughts were focused on something else. They were focused on working in the morgue. So it was an outlet for me for all those obsessive thoughts. But then I was unemployed, and I would, first I wanted to, because I had to make another set of keys for the morgue. Actually, I went to a locksmith and I asked him to make me another set of keys of the morgue. So I had the actual keys to the morgue. So my plan was to go back during a weekend and wait for the other co-workers to come and shoot them by one, kill them, and yeah, that was the plan, basically. But then I was thinking of, doing this, killing, but I was thinking of doing it in the long term. See what I mean? So actually not getting caught. So I was devising plans on, finding a way to not getting caught doing it. And my girlfriend at the time was a professional dom, dominatrix, right? And she was using some kind of network that existed in France before the internet. It was called Minitel. It was some kind of computer network that you would have access to via
like chat rooms phone. And stuff like that.
Some kind of chat room. It was like Craigslist, or or even a Grindr, or yeah. See.
Okay.
So it was mostly used for small ads and contacting people, and especially in the kink scene. So it was used both by the S&M community and the gay community to hook up and meet people, etc.
Okay.
At a time when you didn't have access to all those apps that you have now.
Sure.
So my girlfriend at the time, she was using that to meet her clients, etc., and I would watch her do. Right. So I knew how those networks worked. And I started to understand that it was easy to meet someone up via this network without leaving any trace, because you would call the people from public phone booths. They were a thing back in those days. And they would easily give you an appointment somewhere, and some even gave you their addresses because they wouldn't they had no reason to fear anything.
Right. And if you want to hook up, you need to give someone your address.
Exactly.
Right.
So this is how I got the address of this person, and the idea was not, the idea was it was like, in the crypts, it was to experiment something. Okay. And the thing I wanted to experiment was actually the gun that I had bought. I had bought a gun, and it was a gun that's used for sports, target shooting. It was a 22 caliber gun, and I was not sure if that gun would be enough if I wanted to kill my coworkers properly.
It's a very small. For people that don't know, a 22 is a very, very small caliber weapon. I mean, obviously, it still kills, but it's not like a 44 Magnum or some big gun that does massive damage, right?
And the thing with the 22 is that it gains velocity when you shoot from a long distance. When you shoot at a close range, the bullet doesn't gain enough velocity to have its maximum impact.
Oh, so, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. It's really the velocity itself is a key factor in the 22. So I knew a guy who worked in a gun shop who taught me those things because I didn't know. And so when I bought that 22, I was wondering if it would be enough. And since my girlfriend at the time was easily meeting up people via that way, I decided to use that same network to contact a guy, go to his place and shoot him with that gun. And that's what I did, basically. So there was no emotion, there was no anger. It was totally random because a few minutes before chatting with the guy, I didn't even know he existed. So it was totally random. And it wasn't even motivated by, because you would think, okay, since I'm straight and the victim was gay, you would easily think, yeah, it's a hate crime or whatever. Not even. And this is what you have to understand. It's not because not because it happened that way that it was a hate crime. Not at all. Because
it wasn't personal. There was nothing personal about it.
It wasn't personal. Exactly. It could have been anybody. And it could have been somebody in a graveyard, because I had also this, when I would go to graveyards, I would see other people, tourists, etc. And in my mind, I had the same process, seeing them and thinking that they did not belong there and they did not deserve to be in the graveyard. Only me. It was my territory.
In a way that you saying it's not personal almost makes it harder for the public to understand. Even someone like me, like it makes it so much more difficult to wrap my head around. That the fact that it is just the luck or the unluck of the draw for that man.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. It's the same. And if I would compare my train of thought to a criminal type, I would compare it to the mass shooter, right? Because the mass shooter, okay, he has a more or less, knows more or less who he will target. But at the end of the day, he shoots at anybody. Of course, he will go back to his school because he's been bullied there or whatever,
Right.
and he will shoot at everybody inside. But he will not look out for one specific person. He will just, shoot everyone inside.
Right.
And if I had to compare my mindset during those days to a specific type of criminal, that would be the type of criminal, I guess, or maybe someone like the Zodiac killer who did not have any specific target in mind, etc. But I was watching the Son of Sam documentary on Netflix.
I just watched that the
with
other night.
those,
Yes.
yeah, and all those rumors of satanic cults, etc. I've read the Morituri book years and years ago, and being in the satanic scene myself, and understanding the motives behind Berkowitz, all I see is an incel getting, a guy who didn't get laid when he was a teenager, and he was just shooting on his frustration, acting on frustration. And I don't see any occult or weird motive behind it. And if I can, tell you that, it's because I can easily see that this guy was driven by a deep hatred towards women.
Right. It seems pretty clear.
And,
yeah.
For me, it's really clear. And this guy invented this story of satanic cult, etc., because he had an agenda as being a born-again Christian. That was his agenda. It's always easy to find a scapegoat, and the devil made me do it, basically.
Right.
But I easily can understand motives, and that's a thing that I've learned with time behind serial crime, because I more or less know what's going on through the head of the people. The one I relate maybe the most is Jeffrey Dahmer.
Okay.
Because he had a fascination with physical death and mutilation, etc. So this is something I can easily understand, and the way he became like that, I can understand. And it's harder for me to understand a killer like I don't know, the Green River Killer, or etc., because it's a totally different type of motive and ammo, and this is hatred. Those kind of crimes are hate crimes. They're hate crimes against sex workers, hate crimes against specific individuals that represent something that they think is evil or bad. So there is judgment from their part. And what sets me apart and sets maybe other criminals apart is that there's actually no emotional bond with the victim.
But you do have there is a bit of judgment from you, though. Like when you wanted to kill your coworker because he didn't appreciate the job, like you also have some of that judgment to you as well, right?
True.
Yeah.
True. It's a judgment, and it's a judgment not based on what society taught me was right or wrong. It's a judgment based on what I thought was perceived as a relationship with an entity, and that entity being death, and that relationship that I was that was growing in me, and that bond that I felt with this entity. For me, other people could not share it, and I was more or less chosen in that way. So it definitely was a judgment from my part, of course, but at the same time, it was not a judgment based on moral values or something that was taught to me by society. But yes, it was also judgmental, of course.
So you go to, what's it? His name was Thierry. Is that his name?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So you go to his apartment.
So he opens the door. I had the weapon in my pocket. I stepped in. He turned to close the door, turned towards me, and that's when I shot him.
Right away, just no
Yeah, right away. No
conversation.
interaction, nothing. No,
And
nothing.
the moment, like when you walked into the apartment, I know that when you were with your coworker, you weren't sure what was going to happen. When you stepped into to Thierry's apartment, did you know for sure that you were going to do it this time?
Oh yes, definitely. I was totally sure. There was no hesitation, and the wheels were in motion. Couldn't stop. Nothing could have stopped me.
Were you nervous in your stomach? Did you have adrenaline, or were you just calm? What was your body going through?
I remember being weirdly, bizarrely, I was very, very calm. My heart rate was totally normal. It was like, being on an automatic pilot, doing things, and not even, sometimes I would feel like I was watching me doing this.
That was what I was going to ask. I was going to ask you if you felt like you were out of body, or did you feel very present?
Both, actually. I felt all the sensory overload, the smell of gunpowder, the energy in the room, everything, and even more, because for me it was a spiritual thing, spiritual experience. So I even felt the physical presence of death in the room.
Right, because
It's really hard to
you keep
explain.
mentioning that the idea of death to you, it's almost like a god, where it's its own entity. I guess that's the best word you keep using.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly. Yeah.
death is not something that happens. Death is something that exists.
Yes.
Right.
For me, it is. For me,
Yep.
it is. It's like, it might sound childlike, maybe, but when you think about God, it's also a childlike notion.
I agree.
So, except that my childlike notion was based on experience, since I had actually felt the experience of death. Seen my grandfather, I had seen other relatives, visited them in the morgues or the funeral homes. I had spent all my teenage years in graveyards, and I had worked in that morgue for about a year. So I had another foot in the grave. And I was, the only thing that was missing was actually giving death and being, the left hand of death. So
So
that was missing.
your childhood and all those, 5 years in the graveyard and the morgue were kind of all leading up to this moment for you.
Yeah, exactly. It was all those things that I'm telling you. There are progression, and it just not like I woke up one day and I decided to do this. It's
Mhm.
all my experience as a kid, as a teenager, and as a young adult were leading to that point. Okay.
Mhm.
And were leading to other things, because I had other things in mind, and it was the beginning of my journey. This, okay, in my mind.
Mhm.
So it was not the end. This is another thing you have to understand. It was just something I had to go through to go to another level. And maybe that's why I felt so emotionally detached at the time, because it wasn't really what I had in mind. This was just practice.
Mm.
See what I mean?
Yeah,
I
I
know
do.
that it
I do.
sounds, well,
It's, so
it might sound horrible saying this, but in my mind, and if you want to understand how my mind works or other minds work regarding to those kind of individuals,
Mhm.
you have to understand what really goes on in the mind and the wheels that are in motion. And most killers, they will lie to you when they're in jail, when they're in prison. They will say, okay, this is what went through my head, etc. But they will tell you that to sound normal, because
Mhm.
they a fear of being judged. I don't have that fear of being judged anymore. I've been on trial. I'm out of prison, and I'm not trying to be a normal individual, I'm not trying to have a low profile like so many criminals who go out of jail and try to vanish.
That's
I'm
something.
I
Sorry,
yeah
that's something I want to get into at the end,
mm,
because I have a lot of questions about that. But I do
sure
want to say that I really do. I appreciate your openness and honesty about this,
okay.
because I don't agree with obviously what you did. I think it's a. I mean,
It's a good thing for you.
it's a horrible thing, but I am very
Mm,
interested in the mindset
mm,
and like I said, because I have so many similarities to you as far as childhood,
mm.
and I'm always interested as to why people go different directions. So I do appreciate
Sure.
you being so honest and open about it.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
so the moment you shoot him, you can go through the details if you want, but it didn't happen easily. You had to shoot him multiple times, and he didn't pass away easily. It was very hard for him. Um,
Yes.
but when it
All,
was
all in all, it lasted like 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
which is terrible. But when it was finally over with, did you feel a sense of accomplishment? Did you have any regret in that moment? Like, talk me through your thoughts right after you realized that you had completed your task.
So this was the first step. And I had many, many things in my mind going through about what to do next. The thing is, I had brought something to go to the second step, which was using knives, etc., and a scalpel that I had stolen from the morgue. But I had heard footsteps because it was an apartment. I had heard footsteps in the stairs, and it was a call back to reality. And I understood that the gunshots, even if they weren't really loud, because the 22 caliber doesn't produce a very loud noise. It's like
A pop.
slamming shutter door.
Yep.
Yeah, a pop. Yeah, but still, I was, wondering if it had been heard. And since the footsteps were really fast, I was like wondering if somebody was calling for help. So I just left him as is, lying on the floor, and I left. Um, when I came back, I was in a very agitated state of mind. One of the things, because there was many things going through my mind, but one of the things that I wanted to do was actually film myself doing this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was of course at the time when the GoPros didn't exist. All we had access to were cameras, VHS recorders. So I wanted to buy a camera. So I took the idea of that person and bought a camera. All right. And such was my state of mind that I didn't even ask myself if the person selling me the camera would make a record of the stolen check, because it was a stolen check,
Mm-hmm.
and check my ID or whatever. When I came back home, I watched the news, and there was, and this is how I got very lucky at first. At the same time I was doing this, 3 hours later, 5 blocks away, there was a police shootout involving 2 individuals who had shot down 5 people. It
Oh,
was a major in the news. It was three policemen died. One of the shooters had died, and his girlfriend was still alive, and she had shot at cops, etc. It was a major, 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 major story in the news.
absolutely. Yeah.
So since they were not talking about my case, but they were talking about that case, I thought that they suspected them of having done what I had done. All right. So for me, I watched this. The following days, okay, the press mentioned the murder, and there was something on TV, but of course, everything was focused on that other case. And the more days passed, and the more I thought I had gotten away with it. So I was preparing the other step, the next step. And that step involved me going back to the morgue, etc. So I went back to the morgue during the weekend with the set of keys that I had made a copy of. And I decided to go back before Christmas because this happened in October, but I wanted to do it for Christmas, using Christmas Day to do that. I wanted to go to the morgue back on Christmas and kill all the co-workers. This was the next step.
Why Christmas? Why Christmas for you?
Oh, the symbol,
Sure.
everybody's, the symbol, just the symbol, not even the religious symbol, just the symbol of everybody,
A joyous, happy holiday, right?
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, that was the next plan. But what I didn't know, of course, was that there was this investigation going on, and they were actually more or less identifying me step by step. And like 5 weeks after, I was arrested, and I was on custody, and this is how it all began.
Okay. And when you were arrested, like, when you saw the police, did you know immediately that they got you, or how did the arrest go?
Yeah, immediately I knew that it was over because, I didn't care to get rid of any weapon. So everything was at my place. So I knew that the ballistics, etc. I knew that,
Right.
So I was left on my own a lot because, it's one of the techniques as cops. They have to leave you on your own so that you have time to think over and over again. And, for them, it's easier to confess. So I was, thinking about all the options that I had. And I've realized that the best option for me was to confess to what I had been doing. Except that there was one question remaining: what's up with all the other things that would find at my place?
Because there was bones and there was blood and ashes and all kinds of things, which probably made them think that this was probably a bigger issue than just a random murder.
Yeah, that's what they told me when they were doing the police search. One of the cops, he acted like I wasn't in the room. I was in the room because it's by law you have to be in the room you actually see what they are taking away or using as evidence. But he acted like I wasn't in the room. He told the other cops, okay, this is going to lead us to other cases. Because they found other weapons and they found the skulls, etc. And they were a bit taken. Yeah, let's say that it's the first time that they actually had to deal with a similar case.
Right.
Interestingly enough, they were investigating in a serial murder case in Paris, which became one of the major serial murder cases in Paris. And I had the same investigators investigating that murder case and mine. So I don't know. They never really told me, but I don't know if they suspecting me or whatever. But
I would imagine that. I'm sure you would have been one of the top suspects for something like that.
Well, yeah. Anyways, for them, it was they were convinced that something else was going on. So that was what they had in mind. And when the thing with France is that it's not cops who did the investigations after you've been arrested. It's a judge. This is why it takes so long for people in France to go on trial. You have to wait at least 2 or 3 years to actually be on trial. So you remain in custody for 2 or 3 years. You don't even know what kind of sentence you will have, or if you will be released or due to lack of evidence. But you have to wait 2 or 3 years because the investigating judge, that's how he's called, has to make his own investigations And it's not only about investigating the case itself, it's about also all the psychiatric evaluations.
Right.
And for my specific case, they spent lots of resource on the psychiatric evaluation. Usually, you have 2 or 3 doctors who examine you, and I had 7 doctors who examined me for a period of 2 years.
And what did they?
So,
What kind of conclusion did the doctors come to in your case, as far as any kind of mental illness or anything like that? Was there any of that?
so the thing is, they came up with something that I gave them, because I knew from the start that if I told them exactly what was going on through my mind, they would send me to a psychiatric ward and I would never get out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's as simple as that. I knew from an outside perspective that I couldn't be cured.
Right.
Yeah, I was beyond that, you know.
Right.
So I had to find something that could be cured. So I spent some time. Also, one thing I didn't tell you, before working in the morgue, I studied 1 year of psychology at the University of Jussieu La Sorbonne. It's a big university in Paris. So I had tools. I had, psychology tools. I knew a few things about psychology and psychiatry. So when it was my turn to be evaluated by a psychiatrist, I knew that if I told them exactly what was going on through my head, the fact that I was planning on other things, etc., I would be, sent to a dark hole somewhere and never get out.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make them feel that I had something that could be cured through medicine and medication. So I told them, for example, that I heard the dead talk to me when I worked in a morgue, that I got orders from them so according to them, it was some kind of schizophrenia that was developing there in the morgue. And under French law, it was the diminished responsibility. And diminished responsibility, it's more or less something that spares you a life sentence.
Right.
Okay, because of diminished responsibility, you get a lesser sentence if you actually get medicine and see a doctor on a regular basis, etc. So it all lasted 2 years where there was this, battle between me and them, and me trying to, not trying, just giving them an interpretation of the facts that made me look like I was mentally ill when it happened, that I was not totally responsible for what I had done,
right,
and
right.
that I could be cured. Psychiatrists, the way that I see them, they're like, psychiatry is it's a face. It's actually a face in something that's called psychiatry. So they have a patient,
Mm-hmm.
and they feel reassured when that patient comforts them in their own theories about mental health. See what I mean?
Yes, I do.
They feel justified, they feel that they're doing the right thing, and they feel useful. So if you present them a way of thinking that they think can be cured, and a pathology that's simple, that can be described easily and easily be cured, then, for them, it comforts them in their belief system, and they do not question
Right.
the fact that what you're telling them is real or not.
And in your case, it wasn't real. You were in essence lying to them and telling them what you thought you had to say to spare your life or to
exactly
make your sentence lighter. But did you think at that time that there was any hope for you as far as getting out of the mindset that you were in, or did you think that there was no changing for you at that point?
No, for me, things would go worse.
Okay.
Honestly, the way I saw it, I would go, okay, maybe spend 10 years, 15 years behind bars, get out when I would be age 35, maybe 40, and do all those things again. That was the program. That was the idea. Yeah, and,
Okay.
Then, I even started to write to serial killers in jail. I started to correspond with people like Richard Ramirez, and I would actually get letters from those people, and it was not out of curiosity, etc. It was more like knowing more about what drove them to kill, or get tips, or
So these were people that you, in essence, looked up to and admired in
yeah,
some ways.
yeah, exactly. And I more than that, it was people that I thought only them could understand me,
Right.
and vice versa.
Right.
For me, it was, I didn't feel part of the rest of humanity anymore. I was part of the I was a
Subculture or
criminal.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a criminal. I was as soon as you have handcuffs on you for a major crime, you're not part of humanity anymore. Whatever they say, whatever they do, even if they say, okay, we will try to rehabilitate you. No, it's just lies. As soon as you have the shackles, as soon as you are sentenced for a criminal offense, you're not part of humanity anymore. So I was already feeling an outcast. So imagine me in jail being treated as one of the worst criminals that the system had ever seen in France. And how was I supposed to find a way out of this? See what I mean?
Did part of being
stuck.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was stuck in this. I was stuck. And it's not like I didn't feel. Anyways, I felt like that. I didn't feel I was part of that anymore. I was not part of the system. I was just trying to fuck with the system as long as possible and as much as possible. So this is what I did in jail. And I did it in very different ways all the time. And I got this lesser sentence of 12 years instead of 20, because the
Diminished
prosecution
responsibility.
asked. Yeah, exactly. The prosecution had asked for 20 years in jail, but thanks to the shrinks who had evaluated me, I got 12.
Okay.
And there's a system in France for good behavior. You get 1/3 of your sentence off. So I served only 8 out of those 12 years. So maybe for some people, 8 years is enough to be reformed or to change, but it wasn't really the case for me. When I got out, I was more or less in the same frame of mind. Okay. But things happened in my life later on that made me human.
What are those things? That's the I'm really interested to know when that happened for you. When, I mean, it seems like how old were you when you got out of prison? 30?
30. It was my 30th birthday, March 22 of 2002, 30th birthday.
Okay.
And right before, the day before, it was, I'm going to tell you because it was very important for what happened next. So, I was, the day before, I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm getting out. Honestly, I'm really tempted to do things again. Then they escorted me to a room and they said, okay, you have to wait. It was the room where you have conversations with your lawyer. There's this guy who comes in. Turns out he's a state-appointed psychiatrist. He says, okay, this is a first in criminal history for me. I have to evaluate you at the end of your sentence. We'd never do that, but I have to evaluate you and see if we have to transfer you to a mental institute instead of releasing you tomorrow.
Okay.
Because of the nature of the crimes, etc. So I was like, okay, I'm fucked. I'm
Yeah.
fucked because I was writing towards all those serial killers, and I was getting mails from satanic cults, and
That doesn't help your case.
yeah, no, it didn't have my case at all. I was painting serial killers. I was known for that. My art was on exhibit in the Museum of Death in LA.
Mhm.
So, I knew that I was fucked. But, okay, the evaluation took eight hours. During those 8 hours, it was really exhausting for me. But during those 8 hours, I was working on a thin line, and I had to, find a way to convince that guy that everything was all right. Okay, I don't know how, but I found a way to work out of this situation. He told me at the end of the 8 hours, he said, okay, I see that you're still drawn by some things, etc. But if we send you to a psychiatric institute, since you're not really psychotic, then we'll have to eventually release you. And the anger that you will build up while you are in that psychiatric institute will be 10 times more dangerous than if you are released tomorrow. And then
Wow.
I understood. It made me understand that, okay, basically those guys, they know what I'm, able to do, but they also know that they I don't know. This guy managed to face me with my inner demons. See what I mean?
It does
He
sound
made
like
me
that.
understand.
Because in
Yeah, he made me.
America, that would never happen. In America, they want to keep you under
Yeah,
control and locked away as long as possible. And this
yeah,
man seems like he knew that for public safety and public interest, the best thing to
mm.
do was probably not to keep you locked up.
Yeah. Because he knew that I would get out eventually because I was smart enough to talk my way out of those situations.
Right.
This is what he understood, and he told me, "You're really smart. You're a very smart individual. So you have very very dark side to you. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying to you, if you want to keep going what you're doing, you'll end up here.
Yeah.
You'll end up here for the rest of your life. You have to find a way to accept who you are and use your energy for something else that is not a nuisance to other people." And I was painting at the time. I was painting those pictures of serial killers, and I told myself, okay, maybe he's right. Maybe I will be tempted. Well, temptation, it's always a thing. But at the same time, I know my limits. I know that being in jail and all. I know there's another way of. There's another outlet. There's other outlets to that dark side,
Sure.
and it's mainly for me. It's creation,
Right.
writing, painting, and doing all those things that still are dark. I still paint serial killers and murder victims, and nowadays I sell products. I sell, I sell horrible, horrible things, but I'm not, I'm not actually hurting physically other people.
That's something that you touched on
And
earlier. Is this how a lot of people who have done the things that you have done, the things that you've claimed you've done, is when they get out of jail, they try to distance themselves from that darkness and distance themselves from that past. But you're someone who, you committed this crime. You kind of, you played the system and you tricked people into giving you a shorter sentence, and you got out on good behavior, which is great, and you've turned this into, like you said, an outlet, and your art reflects your life. Your art reflects your dark interests, and
exactly.
you definitely don't run from your past, which I'm sure for a lot of people, including Thierry's family, probably, and friends and people involved in the case, whether it's the police and the judges and lawyers, they probably have a really, really hard time with it, understandably.
Exactly.
But you didn't run from it, and you more kind of embrace it, which you don't see very often, you know?
The way I see it, it's simple. When I do those things, I'm very public. I do art shows. I run this website, this company. I have a company where I sell those products.
Serialpleasures.com.
I have written
Yep.
serialpleasures.com. I have written my biography, the Gospel of Blood. I'm very public, but being public, people know what I'm doing.
Right.
I could have kept a low profile and disappear in the void, and nobody would know what I would be up to now, and I could be doing some really bad stuff. You know what I mean? At least now people have a visibility over who I am, what I do. And even though those people you mentioned, the people who were involved in the investigation, etc., sometimes journalists are asking questions, and they say, okay, he knows, he's intelligent enough, and that's something that was really smart. It was the judge who actually started all the investigations on my case, who actually said that in a documentary. He said he's smart enough not to go back to jail, and at the same time, at least, even if on a strict moral point of view, what he's doing is extremely questionable, at least we have visibility over him. And the only thing that we are worried about is him influencing other people.
It's a valid point. Yep.
It's a valid point, and I respect that point.
Yep.
And it has happened. There were actually 2 cases where the suspects mentioned my name or mentioned having, they mentioned the case when they were in custody. I don't know. When people say, "Oh yeah, I was influenced by this or that," it's easy to say, but I believe in responsibility. I believe in personal responsibility. It's not because you say you're influenced by this or that it gets you out of your own responsibility. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's still a valid point. But the thing is that he understood clearly is that at least, okay, I'm out in the open, but at least people know what I'm doing, right? So
when these people say that you're an inspiration or that you inspired their acts, does any part of that flatter you, or does it turn you off? Does it bother you? Like, how do you look at that when people say that you influence them?
Because of my unique position, being a criminal that's out and that you can actually reach, can actually send me mail, I actually read them, sometimes I answer them. So because of that position, very specific position, I sometimes get mail from people who are on the verge of doing something. Usually teenagers or young adults. They have all those dark things inside. And I always talk them out of it. Always. I've always been that way. And if there's one thing good that I did in this life, it's this. I probably have convinced a few people not to commit crimes because it's not worth it.
Right.
And each time I tell them, try to find something else.
Right.
Don't even try to be someone else, but at least try to have another outlet, something else. Because at the end of the day, when you get arrested, they will win because you'll be in jail. And they will win. Yeah.
Do you think that you could have found an outlet younger that could have kept you from doing what you did? And if so, what would that have been? What could have stopped you from doing what you did?
It's hard to answer that question because I was in a very, very dark place at the time. And I don't think that you can actually get out of the dark place without going till the end. But for someone who would be on that path but not at that stage, I would recommend writing and writing horror novels or writing scripts for horror movies, or if you have a talent for drawing or painting, try to do that too. There's so many things that you can actually do, and I know it's not the real deal, but you don't want to experience the real deal because it's a trap. Once you're inside, you're inside. You will never get out. I mean, and I don't know. It's not worth it. And I'm not talking about from a moral point of view, because that's the difference between me and others.
You don't have the moral, right?
No. I'm not on a moral debate here. I'm beyond that, way beyond that. You know, like Richard Ramirez said, I'm beyond your experience. I think that when you have a certain achieved a certain level, you're beyond anyone's experience. But what you can see in others is the journey. And if you see that it's not too late, then there are ways to talk them out of doing it. And I've done that, and yeah, it's a thing that I'm proud of having done. I failed also. There's a few times where I failed, but yeah, it's as I said, it's also the part of the Roman emperor syndrome. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
And having that choice of a life is having the power of God yourself. See what I mean?
Right.
You decide.
Sure. So now, well, thank you for that. That's an interesting viewpoint, and I imagine part of being able to help people now, it's almost like a form of public service after the fact, you know, where you can be a resource for people if they wanted to approach you about it. But yeah, you're
but I know, I don't, I know that I have way more enemies than friends. So I know that many of the people who are watching this will judge me, and I'm not even trying to tell them out of judging me. If they want to judge me,
right,
and fine. It doesn't affect me. That's all I can say. It doesn't affect me. If you have a judgment towards me, I don't care. I don't mind. But I will not. I will not try to talk you out of it. I will not try to tell you, oh yeah, I'm a very nice guy when you get to know me. No, only the people who really know me know that. But
well, people
for the public eye, yeah.
People tend to get on a moral soapbox all the time, and that's kind of the way I wanted to approach this, is to show you the respect of a human.
That approach.
Yeah, to show you the respect of I'm not trying to judge you. Like, I have my opinions on on what you've done, and one of my best friends, his mother was murdered, and so it's personal to me in some ways, and I don't want to glorify what you've done at all, but I am just very interested in the psychology of it all. And like I said, I'm so fascinated by where things split for certain people. Why, two people can be raised the same way, have the same childhood, and one becomes, a doctor or a lawyer, and one becomes a convicted killer and an artist, so, and that's what it is. So before we go, I do want to talk about your art and life now. People can go to serialpleasures.com and see you do beautiful paintings.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. They're very dark in nature, and it's gore, death, kind of. I mean, it's your experiences, but it's done really well. And
I try to, what's interesting about painting is that the objects, the paintings, they have a life of their own after you create them. Sometimes I hear about a painting that I have done like 25 years ago, and somebody else owns it, and it had a life of its own over a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating. And I believe that objects have a soul. This is why I also collect serial killer letters and murderabilia and objects that belong to criminals, because I do believe that those objects, they capture part of the soul of their owners. And when you create, as a criminal, when you create a painting, and you get that when you are holding a painting done by John Wayne Gacy between your hands, for example. It's more than just a painting.
Right.
It's a painting that was done by this guy who killed 33 children. So it's creepy, but at the same time, there's an energy coming from the painting, because those hands, they have both created, but they have killed.
Right.
And my art is about, it's a reflection on that. I do Ouija boards, for example, with the killers, and I incorporate DNA and grave dirt from those killers in the Ouija board. So they are used by people who want to invoke the souls of those killers. See what I mean? It's not only a painting, it's also an occult artifact and an occult portal to another world. This is the way I see art, not only painting, but putting your soul inside something.
For someone like yourself, do you see any kind of danger in keeping that in your life and keeping that like to collect pieces of other serial killers, and if you think those things have a soul, does any part of you worry about that kind of reinfecting you or anything like that?
I don't think so, because there is what can happen, and it's as simple as that. Bad things can happen to you with those kind of objects when you feel guilty of owning them.
Right.
And it's very simple. It's a very simple concept, but it's very true. If a part of you feels guilty over owning a letter from Ted Bundy or whatever, then get rid of that object. It's not meant for you. And I really do believe that. It's because I do believe that the negative energy of that person is trapped in that object. And if you feel guilty over it, then it's not for you. Yeah, no, definitely not.
And to this day, do you get any kind of therapy? Like, how do you keep yourself in check? I'm just curious what life is like for you now, as far as, do you ever fear yourself slipping back into old patterns or having those old feelings or impulses?
No, I'm at a point in my life where I've totally accepted who I was and my journey to where I am today. And I'm not going to get into details about stuff that happened to me in the meantime. There were many things. I'm surrounded by good persons now. I'm balanced. They accept me the way I am. And I have found peace of mind. And nothing will get me back to my old habits. No. As long as I have my art, as long as the people I care for are good and feel good, nothing will bring me back to those days. Some people try sometimes to bring me back to those days. When you're somebody like me, you go to clubs, you meet new people. Some people are fascinated, but in a bad way, and they try to drag you down with them with their own dark stuff, dark shit that they never actually
dealt with.
Dealt with. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they see you as the person who will bring it back and bring it, so I try to avoid those persons, and I easily see them coming from afar.
I bet.
So,
I bet.
Yeah.
So,
so
it's kind of beautiful in a way that it sounds like you have found a way to show other people love and also accept love from people.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. This was my journey.
Right.
Definitely, this is a journey, and I'm lucky to have found
Very.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Because it seems like that a lot of people in your situation, you don't ever get away from that path. You never find a way to accept love from
Hmm.
people because you're always suspect, or you, like you said earlier, you didn't see yourself as a human being. So if you don't see yourself as human, how could you possibly
Yeah,
love another human? And
exactly.
somehow through experience and time,
Mm.
acceptance and art, you have found a way to fix those things so far.
Yeah, fixing is the word.
Yeah.
Fixing, exactly.
Yeah, well, I guess it's also
Fixing.
it's in a constant state of fixing, right? So we're never
Yeah,
perfect. So it's something that
yeah.
you're going to have to work on
Mm.
for the rest of your life, I assume. But it
Yeah,
talking to
yeah,
you,
definitely.
it sounds like it's going the right direction.
It's going in the right direction. And the only thing that, triggers me now and then, and is the only thing that, I have a hard time accepting is censorship, because it's counterproductive in my case.
Mm.
Maybe for some people, it's a good thing. Censorship is a good thing. But in my case, when you censor what I do, and I have experienced this a few times in my life, then you're giving me reason to go back to my old ways.
Tell me
See
more
what I
about
mean?
that. Tell me where you've been censored and why you see such a danger in it. Because I agree with you. I think censorship is a dangerous slope to be on. But where have you experienced censorship?
Or it's mostly on what I publicly show on social media,
Okay.
being banned all the time, uh, trying to find ways to distribute my products. There's a lot. We are entering in a society which is constantly judging you for promoting or trying to make money out of those things, but it's not the point. You see what I mean? When you are painting a portrait of a serial killer, you're not. It's not because you do that you glorify them, and I never glorify those persons. Uh, for me, I do not see any glory in it. But what I found interesting in painting a mugshot portrait is that in the portrait that was taken, and that what I tried to show through my art is the moment of truth in that person. And this is what I try to convey through my art. And this is why my art is about serial killers. It's because in their eyes you see the moment of truth, that they are totally naked. You totally see through their souls, and it's not about glorifying them through the mugshot or the painting of the mugshot. It's about finding their inner core, their soul, trying to capture the soul in a painting. And in that sense, it's what art is about. It's trying to find the essence of truth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, See what I mean?
I,
So
I
all those, yeah.
I see what you mean, but I hear what you're saying, but part of me, I don't totally believe that you're not glorifying it a little bit, because earlier you've said that you've look up to and admire these people. So I
Mm,
understand that you're trying to capture a moment, but part of painting that, it is going to glorify it a little bit. And I'm not even saying that's totally a wrong thing, but there has to be some kind of aspect of glorifying or exploiting a little bit, unless I'm completely wrong. That's just kind of how I see it.
mm.
I don't know. I don't know, but I hear what you're saying.
When I was, when I was writing with killers, the idea behind it was because I was trying to find if there was a common ground with them.
Mm-hmm.
If we were on the same league or if we felt the same things. The more I corresponded with them, the more I found weirdly that I had nothing in common with them.
Really?
So yeah, this is weird, and I felt even more isolated because of that.
Oh,
Because
because
at the end of
it's
the day,
funny because most people, if they were corresponding with a serial killer and they realized that they weren't like them, that would be a good thing for most people. But
yeah, of
for
course,
you, you felt more alone.
yeah, exactly. I felt more isolated. I thought that they were more human than I thought,
Mm-hmm.
and that I didn't feel the connection anymore. And from being a teenager, fascinated, idolizing those people, I turned into an adult that were just seeing them as uh, um, a symbol of the the failure of mankind. It's a
Okay.
very complex
No,
idea,
I
but
get it. I understand that. And actually, now that you're saying that, I understand
yeah,
more what you mean about not glorifying it. It makes a little bit more
yeah,
sense to me
exactly.
now. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that. I
Yeah.
do understand more now what you mean. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, well, thank you so much for this time. I've really enjoyed it. I could probably go on another hour with more questions, and
Oh,
maybe we'll
yeah.
do it. Maybe we'll do it again. Um,
Maybe.
but
Yeah.
people can go to your website, serialpleasures.com, and you can look at your art. You can purchase your art. You can
Yeah.
buy custom made Ouija boards, and wild enough, you can get some serial killer influenced sex toys. Which
Yeah.
quick walk me through quickly how that came about, and are they
Because
selling? Are you selling them?
yeah, actually, I'm selling them and they sell.
Yeah.
It came up with a discussion with my girlfriend, and we were joking on the fact that all those Netflix documentaries, so many girls are watching them because they have a crush on the killer, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea came of basically going beyond Netflix and chill, and watching Ted Bundy and chill, and so I created the bun dildo. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a it's an actual dildo with a silicone actually silicone that's used for medical purposes, so it's totally safe, and it's an actual adult toy. And I don't know, people went crazy over it, and yeah, it became curious. Huh?
Yeah.
And yeah, it actually started my company, Serial Pleasures, and then I went on doing completely other things like the Edgin face mask.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's wearing a face mask nowadays, so
Mm-hmm.
I designed a face mask that's supposed to be looking like decomposed dead skin, so it would totally gross out anybody who's looking at it. And
Very
so
Very Leatherface
yeah,
style. Yeah.
very Leatherface style,
Mm-hmm.
and all those products, because all those cases they happened like more than 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they still get the same audience, and that's what's crazy. You have those new generations of kids and young adults who discover those crimes, and those crimes happened like half a century ago. So
Sure.
of course, I understand that those products they outrage a lot of people, and people think that it's totally immoral. But for those who have a dark sense of humor, it's also fun, and it's definitely a very unique birthday present or
Yeah.
Valentine gift.
Or
So
actually,
yeah,
we're recording this on Mother's Day, so it might be a great gift for
oh
my
yeah,
mother someday. Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
wow,
Here's your bun dildo.
totally, oh yeah, well,
Um,
perfect.
yeah, and there's a Night Stalker one that you have up there now.
Yes, we have a nice Tokyo one. We
Mhm.
are going to do a Gacy Pogo butt plug.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm so bad.
Hey, again,
But
like I'm just whether people agree or not, the fact that you have found a way to embrace your dark side even after what you've been through, there's something refreshing about it. You know, you're not
Yeah.
bullshitting anybody. You are
No, no,
you
no.
are who
At
you
least people
are. Yeah.
know exactly. Yeah. You know, if people hate me, okay, so be it. And
Right.
if people find me funny, it's even better.
Yep.
So
Also, you have a right to earn a living, and that's
exactly,
another thing.
because the thing we didn't mention at all is that when I got out of jail, I've worked for 15 years in different morgues
Mm-hmm.
under a new identity. And after those 15 years, they started to investigate on my past. After 15 years, I was working in a Catholic institute. And of course, when they found out about my past, I was totally blacklisted from working in morgues again by those people. So, you know,
Now
this is
let me
when
ask you
I,
this, and you may not answer, or you may not tell the
yeah,
truth. But
sure.
did you ever fall back in any old habits when you were working in the morgue post prison?
Well, believe me or not, no, because I found a purpose working there. And the purpose was to be a link between the living and the dead. So I took my job very seriously, and nobody can say the contrary. I have, because since I have worked for 15 years, have taught my job to younger people who were working there, and they all told me that I taught them a lot of things about respecting that job, working with that people. It was a very special job. You have to, psychologically speaking, it's really demanding. And believe it or not, I was a model worker. I could have been the employee of the decade. But of course, because of my past and because of my other activities as a writer and as a painter, etc., no, they said that they didn't want me anywhere near their hospitals.
Understandable in a
So
way, you know. I kind of
yeah,
understand.
understandable,
Yeah.
understandable. It's just that, you know, I don't especially have any other job skills, or you know,
Right.
so I know how to write, I know how to paint. This is what I'm doing right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that. So all right,
Well, Nico, I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, and
thank you for having me.
of course, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. Um,
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
Good luck going forward, and when the world
Thank you.
opens up and I go back on
Oh yeah,
tour, maybe I'll see you in Paris at some point.
excellent. I definitely would like to see you, to
All
watch
right,
you.
you guys can go to Nico's site, serialpleasures.com. And you can also follow him on Instagram at Nico Claux, which is CLAUX_official.
Exactly, underscore official. Sometimes my social media are banned. It happens, but the only reliable source is serialpleasures.com if you want to check something out. But
All right.
yeah, I'm also on Instagram. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nico. Take
Thank you.
care. And
You too.
again, thank you. I appreciate the honesty and the openness, and it means a lot. And hopefully, it'll help some other people. So, thank you very much.
I hope so.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Well, there it was. Nico, thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Really fascinating. The honesty is, you know, it's commendable, whether you respect what he did or not, which obviously you don't, but you have to appreciate his openness and willingness to explain where he was coming from. So thank you, Nico. If you guys want a bun dildo, or if you ever wanted to have something like the Night Stalker inserted into your asshole or vagina, you can obviously go to serialpleasures.com and hook it up. Other than that, that's it for now. Got a good guest coming up for next week, and some cool stuff planned in coming weeks. Follow us on all the social medias at Rareform Radio. You can follow me at Dan Cleary79. That's it, I guess. Love to you all. Hope you guys have a safe week. Get vaccinated. Wear your masks. Get back to normal. Oh, I have work coming up. I have actual tour work with Jane's Addiction happening in September, which is crazy. really, really crazy to think about going back onto an airplane. I've been on a plane in like 13 months, almost 14 months, which since I was 10, I probably can't say that. Absolutely crazy to have gone over a year. But looking forward to seeing the Jane's Addiction family again on the East Coast. Maybe more. I don't know. I'm just saying. And hopefully we'll see some of you guys out there if it's safe enough and you guys feel comfortable. So get your tickets. Go to janesaddiction.com. I think that's the website. And they're playing a festival. Maybe more. I don't know. Check it out. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you very much for the support. Thanks for listening. And again, thank you, Nico, very much for the open and honest conversation about all things darkness. Until next week, goodbye. Hit the wrong button. Ha ha! Yes! Hit the wrong button. Let's try it again. Wrong button again. And to send it out, here's the outro that we do every week, because I'm a fucking idiot. See you next week for episode 96.
This is Lola, and I'm here to tell the world to stop being such pussies and listen to Rare Form Radio.